Hey guys, tonight we ease into a quiet corner of Olympus, where the pine trees whisper like they're gossiping about the gods, and where the clouds look like pillows no one has fluffed in centuries. You find yourself stepping softly on marble paths, cool under your feet, the moonlight gliding down to silver every statue and stairway. The air smells faintly of resin and olive leaves, as though the mountain itself is steeping you in a gentle tea. Somewhere distant, a forge glows, its smoke curls lazily into the star-scattered sky. You're invited, and you probably won't survive this if you insist on analyzing the mechanics of every myth like a cranky professor. This is bedtime history, not an oral exam. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I always love seeing who's drifting off from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stroll along the marble walkway, past columns glowing in moonlight, heading toward the warm heartbeat of Hephaestus's forge. The god of fire has asked you to escort his bronze attendants, golden maidens, and humming tripods on a gentle mission, to carry steaming cups of herbal tea to Olympus's gods and goddesses. It isn't a task of war or thunder, but of warmth, civility, and a bedtime beverage. You walk slowly, hearing the occasional clank of bronze feet behind you, like wind chimes with legs. As you breathe in the cool night air, you pass carved reliefs showing long-forgotten myths. A lion with wings stretches, carved centuries ago, and you wonder if the sculptor meant it as serious theology or just decoration. Historians still argue whether such hybrid beasts were rooted in foreign trade myths or just the ancient equivalent of doodling dragons on your notebook margin. Either way, it's charming company. You notice a flicker from the forge ahead. The mountain's heartbeat pulses brighter, its rhythm steady. In ancient Greek accounts, Hephaestus was said to have crafted not only weapons for heroes but also delicate jewelry for the gods. That combination, swords and earrings in the same workshop, always makes you imagine the forge like a divine version of a hardware store that inexplicably sells scented candles too. Practicality and beauty glowing side by side. The bronze servants shuffle quietly. One holds a polished tray that reflects the stars, but crookedly, it clearly has not mastered the art of leveling. Another glances down as if embarrassed by its clanging knee joint. You smile because, let's face it, nothing ruins the grandeur of divine service quite like an automaton squeaking like a rusty door hinge. You consider giving it a drop of oil, but maybe Hephaestus is saving that lesson for later. The path bends, and you glimpse clusters of wild herbs growing near the marble steps. Mountain tea, called sideritis, still grows in Greece today. Traditionally, shepherds brewed it for colds and long winter evenings. The thought comforts you. The same plants under your feet once soothed both mortals on rugged hillsides, and if the myths are to be believed, the immortals lounging above. You bend down and catch a faint fragrance, earthy, slightly citrus, and warming. Perfect material for sleepy tea. A breeze stirs the pine boughs, whispering like gossip again, and you glance back at the bronze maidens. They sway in unison, uncanny but also oddly calming, like watching synchronized swimmers who forgot to take off their helmets. They're carrying jars that chime softly when they bump. One bronze maiden tilts her head and seems almost to hum. Was it a trick of acoustics, or did Hephaestus sneak a music box mechanism inside her chest? Historians still debate whether the Greeks imagined these automatons as fully conscious, or simply as magical tools, but either way, in the moonlight, they seem more companion than contraption. The forge looms larger, its doorway glowing like an ember. Every few seconds, a gust of warm air puffs out, smelling faintly of smoke and honeyed metal. You imagine Hephaestus inside, hammering softly, his rhythm steady, almost meditative, and you realize something curious. For a god associated with flame and hammers, his reputation is not of terror, but of patience. Ancient sources describe him limping through Olympus, mocked by some but respected for his craft. You think about how skill, quietly applied, often outlasts mockery. That thought warms you as much as the forge. You step closer, and the sound of bronze feet grows more confident behind you. Perhaps they know they are nearly home. Perhaps you too are nearly settled, ready to sip, ready to rest. The marble shines underfoot. The night folds around you like a blanket, and Hephaestus's forge, lanterns glowing above the entrance, welcomes you into the heart of this sleepy myth. Inside the glowing doorway, you step into Hephaestus's forge, and the sudden warmth wraps around you like a heavy quilt straight from the dryer. The air tastes faintly metallic, tinged with smoke and the sweetness of resin burning somewhere in a corner. You blink, and the room settles into focus. Anvils lined in rows, racks of tools shimmering faintly red, and bellows that move not by human hand but by gears and hidden levers, puffing out sighs like enormous sleeping beasts. You notice how the place hums in a rhythm. The walls seem alive with echoes of hammer on metal, even though tonight the forge is working at a more relaxed pace. The fire glows steadily, not roaring, but breathing. The bronze attendants step past you, their footsteps ringing softly on stone. One of them pauses to adjust a pair of tongs resting at the edge of the hearth. Another places a polished cup onto a shelf, its clang surprisingly polite, like an attempt to whisper in metal. Hephaestus himself appears from the shadows, leaning slightly on one hip, his leg dragging faintly behind him. The myths always emphasized his limp, a reminder of the day Hera flung him from Olympus as a baby. You wince at the thought. If you've ever stubbed your toe on a coffee table, you can barely imagine being hurled from heaven itself. Yet here he stands, god of invention, patron of artisans, limping but not diminished. Historians still argue whether his myth embodies resilience, or whether it was just a narrative excuse for why a divine smith wasn't the typical athlete type. Either way, you sense his presence fills the room, not with pity but with focus. He greets you not with thunder, but with a nod. You're here to help with a simple, yet oddly ceremonial mission, preparing the bronze servants for their tea delivery duties. You glance at the golden maidens clustered nearby. Their eyes gleam faintly, as if tiny lamps are burning behind them. In Homer's Iliad, these maidens were described as having intelligence and voice, assistants who could almost think for themselves. Tonight, they stand ready, trays balanced, heads slightly tilted, like children waiting to be taught their bedtime manners. One of them lets out a clank as her elbow brushes against her neighbor's tray. You chuckle, and Hephaestus raises a brow, half amused, half annoyed. He adjusts a screw at her wrist joint with a tool the size of a quill pen. Instantly, her movement smooths, the squeak vanishing into silence. You're oddly comforted by the realization that even divine creations need maintenance, like a mythic version of turn it off and on again. The bellows sigh, feeding the forge. Their leather hides expand and contract, powered by hidden gears, and you realize this is one of history's earliest imagined machines. The Greeks envisioned not only living bronze attendants, but also self-operating tools. Some historians claim these stories anticipated automata, later built in Hellenistic Alexandria water organs, singing birds, and mechanical theatres. Others insist the myths were purely symbolic, exaggerating the magic of craftsmanship. The debate continues, but for now, you just listen to the bellows, exhale like a tired dog settling at your feet. Hephaestus gestures toward a low bench where a collection of cups waits bronze, silver, and even one oddly shaped like a seashell. Each cup gleams, waiting for its turn to hold warmth. He explains, in a voice low and steady, that the gods need quietness as much as mortals do, and tonight's tea service is not about luxury, but about calm. You nod, resisting the urge to ask if Zeus is truly capable of calm after 3 cups of anything. Behind you, a tripod begins to move. At first, you think it's a statue shifting in the firelight, but then you notice its 3 wheels edging forward, a platform balanced on top. This is one of the legendary tripods Homer described, self-rolling servants, built to glide into Olympus's gatherings. You watch as it tests its wheels on the stone floor, moving gingerly, as if it too is practicing its bedtime stroll. You imagine one of these rolling into a modern cafe to deliver lattes, Starbucks by way of Mount Olympus. A nightmare for baristas, but a dream for those who hate waiting in line. The forge glows around you, casting long shadows of you and the bronze attendants onto the walls. The shadows look almost like a small army, though tonight the battle is only against restlessness. You reach for a cup, feeling its cool surface, and Hephaestus places a hand on your shoulder. His skin is surprisingly warm, as though he carries the forge in his vein. He nods toward the herbs piled on a nearby table, a reminder of the next task, brewing. But for now, you simply stand in the forge's glow, hearing the steady hum of bellows and gears, watching the maidens practice their graceful bows, their trays angled just so. You realize you're teaching etiquette not to gods, not to mortals, but to machines born of myth. And strangely enough, it feels right, like adjusting the posture of sleepy waiters before they deliver the world's most divine bedtime tea. The forge breathes in long, glowing sighs as you step closer to a workbench piled high with scraps of hammered metal, bits of bronze curls, and half-finished contraptions that look like they wandered in from a steampunk dream. Hephaestus waves you toward the heart of the project, tonight's star, the teapot. Not just any teapot, but a bronze kettle designed to whistle softly, like a lullaby, when the steam rises. You take a deep breath. The air smells of molten copper, hot stone, and just the faintest sweetness from herbs drying near the hearth. Hephaestus lifts a hammer, its handle worn smooth from centuries, and with a measured swing he begins shaping a disc of glowing bronze. The clang rings out not harsh, but resonant, like a deep bell in the night. You steady the piece with a pair of tongs as the god hammers, sparks drifting upward like fireflies. The rhythm is hypnotic, and you find your body falling into the cadence, your breath matching the steady rise and fall of the hammer. The bronze begins to curl upward, becoming a vessel. Hephaestus's limp makes him shift his stance every few blows, and you notice how he has adjusted his entire forging style to accommodate it. Instead of fighting the rhythm, he leans into it, creating a strangely elegant flow. Historians still argue whether myths about his limp were meant to symbolize marginalized craftsmen gaining divine dignity, or whether they simply explained why he wasn't cast in the mold of a heroic warrior. Either way, the forge seems to hum in agreement with his resilience. As the kettle takes shape, a golden maiden glides forward with a jug of water. She tips it precisely onto the glowing bronze, quenching it with a hiss of steam. The sound fills the forge like a sigh of relief, mist rising and curling through the rafters. You flinch at the hot spray, then laugh quietly at yourself who volunteers to help a god forge a teapot and then gets surprised by steam. You're not exactly a hardened blacksmith, more like a sleepy intern drafted into mythical tea service. Hephaestus chuckles softly, the corners of his beard twitching upward. He wipes his brow with a soot-darkened cloth and holds the kettle up for inspection. The surface gleams, still mottled with colour from the quench gold, red, and deep purple swirls. He traces a finger along the spout, making sure it's narrow enough to pour gently, not splash. You imagine the embarrassment of spilling scalding tea on Zeus's lap, and quickly resolve to double-check that spout again before delivery. Next comes the handle. Instead of plain bronze, Hephaestus chooses an inlay of silver twisted with copper, forming a braid that cools the heat quickly. Practical and beautiful. You hold the piece steady as he attaches it with rivets, hammering softly until it's secure. The handle shines in the forge light like a river winding through clay. A quirky thought crosses your mind. If archaeologists in some distant age ever dig this kettle up, they'll argue whether it was ceremonial or just a fancy kitchen appliance. To be fair, future archaeologists argue about almost everything. Just look at the endless debates over whether Stonehenge was a calendar, a temple, or the world's worst picnic site. A second automaton wheels forward, carrying a tray polished to near blindness. It's so shiny you can see your face stretched across it, warped into a sleepy oval. The tray wobbles slightly, and you reach out to steady it, muttering, "Easy there, buddy." The automaton emits a faint whir as though acknowledging your guidance. You almost expect it to wink, but thankfully, it doesn't. Sleepy. Myth narration doesn't need jump scares. The god sets the finished kettle gently onto the tray, and the bronze maiden adjusts her grip as if proud of her burden. The kettle gleams, still warm, and you imagine steam curling lazily from its spout once the herbs are added. Hephaestus then gestures toward the lid, a delicate disc etched with tiny spiral patterns. Each swirl catches the light, almost hypnotic. He tells you the spirals mimic ocean currents, a nod to Poseidon, who will receive his tea by the sea-washed terrace later tonight. The thought is oddly touching, a god of fire making a gift that honors a god of waves. You glance around the forge again, noticing other odd projects tucked in corners. Half-finished automata shaped like birds, a chair with gears instead of legs, a shield that seems to hum faintly when touched. Not everything here is made for war or grandeur. Some pieces look like experiments, or even hobbies. It makes you wonder whether gods also have side projects they never finish. Olympian equivalents of knitting half a scarf or abandoning a model ship on the shelf. As the kettle cools, you run a hand along its rim, marveling at how something so simple can hold so much weight in a story. A teapot, after all, is just a container. Yet here, it's a vessel of peace, civility, and bedtime calm. The clang of hammer-on bronze fades in your ears, replaced by the soft hiss of cooling metal. You feel yourself relaxing, the warmth of the forge seeping into your skin. For a moment, you almost forget the world outside this glowing cave, content to watch sparks drift and shadows dance. Hephaestus nods approvingly. The kettle is complete, one step closer to delivering sleep in a cup to the gods themselves. And you, improbably, are part of the team apprentice to a divine smith, companion to bronze servants, midwife to a teapot that will soothe Olympus into slumber. The forge quiets down, the hammering paused, and Hephaestus gestures toward the bundles of plants stacked along a low stone shelf. The teapot gleams patiently on the bronze tray, waiting for its contents. Your job now is not about metal or sparks, but about fragrance, choosing the herbs that will turn steam into sleep. You step closer, the scent hitting you before your eyes. Take it all in. Bundles of mountain tea with silvery leaves, sprigs of wild mint, stalks of chamomile nodding with tiny daisy-like blossoms, and a curious heap of barley grains tucked in a woven basket. You pick up a stalk of sideritis, the so-called ironwort of Greek mountains, named for its spear-shaped leaves. Shepherds in Epirus once brewed this after long days, believing it healed wounds from iron weapons. Historians still argue whether the name came from its sword-like appearance or its supposed power against spear cuts. But either way, you're just here because it smells lemony and soothing. You imagine handing a cup of this to Ares, god of war, just to see if he'd sigh like a tired grandpa. Next, you brush your fingers across chamomile flowers, their faint apple scent drifting upward. Chamomile was known even in antiquity, steeped not only for sleep but also for skin balms. You picture Aphrodite using it as a cosmetic trick, though you also imagine her rolling her eyes at any suggestion that she needed help looking radiant. A bronze maiden leans down, tilting her head as though inspecting the blooms, then carefully plucks a bundle with surprising delicacy. You half expect her to say, "Good choice," but she remains politely silent. The mint lies nearby, leaves bright and sharp in their scent. You pluck a sprig and breathe in, the freshness clearing your head almost too effectively for bedtime. You consider balancing it with honey, so it sharpens the senses just enough to enjoy the sweetness without bouncing you into a wide-awake state. A quirky fact drifts through your mind. Ancient Greeks sometimes used mint, not for tea but for funerary rites, to mask the smell of the dead. It's a little macabre for a bedtime story, but you chuckle anyway, muttering, "Not exactly the aroma I want in a cup tonight." Hephaestus smirks knowingly, as if the god of forges has heard stranger jokes in his workshop. You crouch near the basket of barley, golden grains glinting like treasure. Barley tea might not be as famous as the others, but even now, roasted barley drinks appear across cultures from Korean boricha to Italian barley coffee. The ancients, too, brewed barley into decoctions, often mixed with herbs for energy or calm. The scholarly debate here lingers over whether Greeks genuinely drank it hot as a beverage or only used it in gruel-like porridges. Tonight, though, it's tea, and you're happy to let history bend for the sake of flavour. A bronze servant rolls forward with a clay jar, its lid etched with bees. Inside, you glimpse golden honey glistening like liquid sundae. The servant tilts the jar just slightly, a deliberate test pour. A sticky drop glides down the side, and you wipe it quickly with your finger, tasting the sweetness. Smooth, floral, not too strong. You grin, realizing you've just sampled god-grade honey without permission. Hephaestus notices but pretends not to. He's busy adjusting the kettle lid, his focus sharp, though you catch the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. You begin arranging the herbs on the tray: sideritis for grounding, chamomile for calm, mint for brightness, and barley for warmth. The mixture smells like a meadow under starlight, soft and wild at the same time. A bronze maiden lifts the kettle carefully, her joints humming as she tips in fresh water from a cistern fed by a mountain spring. The steam rises, carrying the first mingled notes of the herbs. You inhale deeply, the blend washing through you, loosening your shoulders, softening the edges of thought. The forge falls into a hush. Even the bellows seem to exhale more gently now, as though the entire workshop has decided to sip the air. You glance at the automata. One polishes a clay cup with exaggerated precision. Another tilts its head as if listening to the bubbling kettle. They look almost proud of their role, attendants in a myth where the climax is not a war but a tea party. And you? You're oddly honoured to be part of it. A memory surfaces reading somewhere that in symposia, ancient Greek drinking parties, wine was often mixed with herbs and honey for both taste and ritual meaning. Tonight, you're conducting a softer kind of symposium, one meant not for debate or poetry contests, but for relaxation. You imagine Socrates being handed chamomile instead of diluted wine, and you can't help laughing at the idea of him yawning halfway through a philosophical argument about justice. The kettle whistles softly, the spirals on its lid catching light as steam curls upward. Hephaestus leans over, inhales, and nods once. Approval given. The tea is ready. You hold a clay cup, feel its warmth seep into your palms, and you wonder, will the gods truly drink this? Or is the act itself enough, the ritual of serving, the quiet companionship of tea shared under Olympus's stars? Historians, predictably, still argue whether such myths of divine domesticity reflect actual ritual practices or just poetic imagination. You shrug. Tonight, all that matters is the smell of herbs and the glow of bronze. Behind you, a golden maiden shifts her tray into place, her eyes glimmering faintly in the forge light. She seems almost eager, and with the kettle now filled and steaming gently, you know the next lesson awaits, teaching these metal attendants the fine art of not dropping tea in front of gods. The bronze kettle hisses softly as it settles on the tray, and you glance at the golden maidens, Hephaestus's gleaming attendants who now stand in a neat row, waiting for their next lesson. They hold clay cups and polished trays with stiff precision, like schoolchildren at their first recital. You clear your throat, amused at the fact that you are about to instruct divine automata in etiquette. Somewhere, a historian would shake their head at you. Somewhere else, a barista would nod in solidarity. You start simple. Rule number 1, you say, voice calm and slow, is pacing. No god wants their tea delivered at the speed of a panicked courier. The maidens tilt their heads in unison, the movement almost eerie, then take synchronized steps forward. The clank of bronze on stone rings a little too sharply, like cymbals played by overenthusiastic toddlers. You wince, holding up a hand. Softer, you whisper, as though coaxing them into a lullaby. They pause, adjust, and this time glide forward with gentler weight. You nod approvingly. One maiden extends her arm in a graceful arc, balancing a tray with perfect poise. The effect is impressive, until her elbow joint lets out a squeal like a rusty door. You stifle a laugh, muttering, "Not exactly ASMR friendly." Hephaestus, standing nearby, raises a brow but says nothing. Instead, he produces a vial of oil and dabs it onto the hinge. The squeal vanishes. You grin at the thought. Even divine machines need lubrication, much like modern commuters need coffee. Rule number 2, no clanking at crucial moments. You demonstrate how to place the cup gently, without ringing it against the saucer. The maidens mimic you, their bronze fingers surprisingly dexterous. One places her cup so quietly you almost don't hear it. Another gets overconfident and nearly drops hers. The clang reverberates through the forge, echoing like a gong. Everyone freezes. You hold up a finger, serious but amused. That, you say, would wake Zeus from a nap, and you do not want to be responsible for that. The maidens tilt their heads again, absorbing the lesson. You imagine their bronze minds etching your advice somewhere deep in their gears. Historians still argue whether these automatons in Homer's account were conscious beings or simply marvels of craft. Tonight, As one raises her tray with something like pride, you lean toward the side that says, maybe they felt just enough to care about doing well. Rule number 3, posture. You gently adjust the stance of one maiden, lowering her shoulders so she doesn't look like she's preparing for battle. You nudge another's chin up so she appears confident, not sulky. The third, however, you leave as she is, because frankly, she looks perfect, and you don't want to mess with bronze perfection. The group now resembles a tiny honor guard, ready not for war but for a tea ceremony. You test them with a mock delivery. You sit on a low stool, pretending to be an Olympian noble too weary to pour their own tea. The maidens approach in formation, trays glinting, steps light. One bows gracefully, offers the cup, and even tilts the kettle just enough for a steady stream. You sip theatrically, sighing with exaggerated delight. The automata shift as though pleased. You chuckle. Not bad for machines who probably think a tea leaf is just decorative confetti. As you continue, you slip in a few fringe tidbits for their education. You mention that in ancient Greek banquets, slaves, not bronze maidens, were the ones pouring wine, and sometimes the task was seen as an honor if the guest was important. You also throw in that some symposium hosts used awkwardly shaped cups, called kyathoi, that spilled if handled carelessly. Basically history's passive-aggressive way of encouraging moderation. The maidens, unfazed, tilt their heads, as though considering this trivia. Maybe they'll gossip about it later in clanks and squeaks. The practice runs continue. You ask them to pivot gracefully, trays balanced high, cups steady. Their bronze limbs move smoother with every repetition. One even improvises a tiny curtsy, which earns her a soft chuckle from you and a raised brow from Hephaestus. He doesn't correct it. Perhaps he's charmed too. For a moment, the forge feels less like a workshop and more like a dance hall. The maidens gliding in bronze ballet, trays reflecting the firelight. The kettle whistles again, ready for refills, and the maidens step aside, perfectly poised. You realize with sleepy satisfaction that you've succeeded. The bronze attendants can now serve tea with dignity, calmness, and minimal clanking. The gods of Olympus may bicker endlessly about wars and love affairs, but tonight, at least, their tea will arrive in style. You lean back on the stool, arms crossed, smiling at the oddity of it all. You came here to help with tea, and now you've turned into Olympus's unofficial etiquette coach. Somewhere, if myths had Yelp, you'd probably get 5 stars for service with a side of sarcasm. The forge glows with a sleepy orange light as Hephaestus gestures toward the far wall, where an array of self-moving tripods stands waiting. At first glance, they look like ordinary bronze stands, 3 legs, a flat surface on top, but then you notice the faint shimmer of gears tucked beneath their rims. One suddenly gives a twitch, rolling forward a few inches on little bronze wheels. You blink, realizing this is the Olympian version of a delivery cart. The tripods creak awake, their wheels turning with a soft whir, and they begin to shuffle into formation. It's not exactly military precision, more like grocery carts with minds of their own, but they're eager. You clap your hands softly. All right, sleepy squad, you murmur. Time to test the route. The golden maidens, already holding trays and cups, fall in line behind the tripods, forming what might be the strangest but most charming tea delivery parade in history. You point to the marble ramp leading out of the forge. First rule, you say, test your brakes. One tripod obediently rolls forward, kettle balanced carefully, only to squeal alarmingly as it overshoots and bumps into the doorframe. Hephaestus sighs, grabs a spanner, and adjusts a spring. The tripod hums again, steadier this time. You shake your head, laughing. Better a ding in the doorway than in Zeus's lap. In Nadi 5, and when he tames Scythe, the next tripod demonstrates its spout mechanism. A small hinge tilts forward, pouring out water in a steady stream. You test it with a clay cup, watching as the liquid slides smoothly with no splashes. It's oddly soothing, like watching one of those endless YouTube coffee pouring videos. Another tripod, however, pours too quickly, flooding its saucer in seconds. You step back, muttering, and that's why we test before service. The parade continues around the forge, circling like a slow carousel. Bronze wheels roll across the stone floor, each squeak gradually replaced by smoother motion as Hephaestus oils and tweaks. The golden maidens practice alongside them, balancing trays with mock seriousness. One maiden pauses to wipe down her tray again, as though it might impress Athena later. You whisper, "That's overachieving, even by divine waiter standards," and chuckle at your own joke. You add another layer to the lesson. Spill-proof lids. You demonstrate how to secure each kettle with its patterned bronze lid, reminding the attendants that a lid is the difference between peaceful sipping and a slip hazard on Olympus's marble floors. One tripod clicks its lid shut too firmly, then struggles to open it again. You lean down and whisper conspiratorially, "Happens to the best of us. Even Tupperware gets stuck." How so, pals of the kind tea? In the corner, a pile of discarded prototypes catches your eye. Handles bent too thin, spouts cracked, wheels warped from too much heat. It's a reminder that even gods improve by trial and error. Historians still argue whether the myths of self-rolling tripods reflected real mechanical experiments in early Greece or were purely poetic imagination. Looking at the mess of failures, you think it's probably both. After all, invention often looks like clutter until it works. The test run resumes. The tripods roll toward the forge's exit, then circle back, balancing kettles with increasing grace. One rolls slightly too fast, nudging your shin. You glare half seriously and say, "Careful, that's a yellow card." The bronze contraption pauses, wheels squeaking as though embarrassed. You pat it gently. "No worries, we'll get there." Soon, the line of automatons is gliding smoothly, trays steady, lids tight, pause perfect. You picture them later tonight, rolling quietly through Olympian halls, like a fleet of bronze butlers carrying steaming cups. It's absurd, yes, but absurd in the coziest way machines designed not for war or labor, but for the simple act of serving tea. The forge hums quieter now, its tasks nearly complete. The air smells of herbs and warm bronze, a curious blend of garden and workshop. You stretch, shoulders loosening, and watch the maidens and tripods shuffle to a halt. They seem almost proud of themselves, as if waiting for applause. You oblige with a soft clap, whispering, "Well done, team." With the bronze parade ready, you know the next step is to leave the forge and carry this sleepy caravan into the night. The gods are waiting, and the first stop, Hephaestus reminds you with a tilt of his head, is the balcony of Aphrodite, a delicate task tea service for the goddess of love. With servants made of bronze and wheels, you can already imagine the mix of elegance and comedy waiting there. The forge doors creak open, releasing you and your bronze caravan into the cool night air. Stars scatter overhead, and the marble walkway gleams faintly, guiding your path upward toward a balcony lined with rose vines. The air shifts here less metallic, more perfumed, like the whole mountain decided to spritz itself with floral cologne in honor of Aphrodite. You lead the procession, golden maidens clinking softly behind you, tripods rolling with their kettles steady. Steam curls lazily from the spouts, as if the tea itself is already sighing in anticipation. As you approach the balcony, you hear the faint trickle of a fountain and catch the glimmer of roses glowing silver in the moonlight. Aphrodite lounges there, reclining on a couch carved from seashell marble, her hair shimmering like it's permanently backlit by a golden hour filter. She glances up, amused, at your odd little procession. "Tea?" she asks, her voice lilting, playful. You bow politely, though the automata nearly ruin the moment by clanking their trays in unison like an over-enthusiastic percussion section. You shoot them a look, whispering under your breath, "We practiced this." To their credit, they adjust quickly, their movements smoothing as they approach. One golden maiden steps forward, balancing the polished tray, and presents a steaming cup with a bow that would have earned applause in any mortal tea-house. Aphrodite accepts it, lifting the cup delicately. Steam curls around her face, blending with the perfume of roses. She inhales the fragrance and smirks faintly. "Chamomile?" she asks, raising an eyebrow. You nod. Chamomile, mountain tea, and just a hint of mint. She takes a sip, lips curving, soothing, though perhaps unnecessary. I hardly need help to sleep. You grin, biting back a comment about how even the goddess of beauty might appreciate something to keep her from doom-scrolling late at night. Some truths transcend time. One bronze servant, eager to impress, begins polishing the marble railing beside her seat, its cloth squeaking comically. Aphrodite watches, bemused. "Do they always tidy as they serve?" she asks. You shrug. "They're multitaskers. Tea and housekeeping, 2 for 1. The goddess chuckles softly, the sound like bells in water. She sets her cup down carefully and leans against the railing, eyeing the attendants with a kind of maternal fondness. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's myths emphasized indulgence or domesticity, but tonight, in this quiet moment, she seems content with both. The roses stir in a breeze, petals drifting down like crimson confetti. One lands on the bronze maiden's head, and for a fleeting instant she looks crowned, a metallic attendant crowned with a flower. You can't resist whispering, "Nice hat," and though the automaton doesn't respond, you swear her stance becomes a touch prouder. The tea's steam carries across the balcony, mingling with the fountain's spray. Aphrodite lifts her cup again, watching you over the rim. "It is curious," she murmurs, "to see Hephaestus's work not in chains or thrones, but in kettles and cups." Her tone is half teasing, half thoughtful. You bow slightly, offering, "Even gods need bedtime rituals." She smiles at that, a slow, indulgent curve of her lips, and nods. The golden maidens complete their service, stepping back into formation with trays raised just so. They seem proud, as if even they know this stop was delicate. Serving tea to the goddess of love isn't just about pouring, it's about grace, timing, and perhaps a dash of flattery. You feel a ripple of relief wash through you. No cups spilled, no clanging disasters, no hurt divine egos. At least, not yet. You take a last look around the balcony, noticing details you missed on arrival. The roses aren't just decorative, they climb into shapes. A dolphin, a harp, even a crude outline of a dove. Was this intentional gardening or simply the overzealous work of vines? Scholars would debate, of course, but you prefer to imagine Aphrodite strolling here on lazy afternoons, pruning the roses herself with laughter and idle humming. She dismisses you with a wave, her cup nearly empty, her eyes already drifting half-closed as though lulled by the warmth of the tea. The fountain splashes softly, the roses sway, and you motion to the automata. Time to move on. The bronze maidens turn with practiced poise, trays balanced, and the tripods creak into motion again. The balcony fades behind you, a little pocket of calm left in your wake. The next stop waits downhill, where honey glistens in amphorae and grapevines twist lazily along trellises. Dionysus is expecting you, though perhaps not as calmly as Aphrodite. You can almost hear his laughter floating on the breeze already, and you sigh. Delivering tea to the god of wine, what could possibly go wrong? The path bends downward from Aphrodite's balcony, and the perfume of roses fades into something sweeter, heavier, and unmistakably sticky. Even before you see the amphorae, you can smell them. Honey jars stacked along the walkway, golden liquid glimmering in the moonlight like tiny trapped suns. Vines climb nearby trellises, leaves broad and heavy with grapes that look far too ripe for midnight. You know exactly whose territory you've stumbled into. Sure enough, Dionysus himself appears, reclining under a pergola woven with grapevines, his head wreathed with ivy leaves and his smile as wide as the moon. His robe is half fastened, half forgotten, and his eyes sparkle with mischief as he notices your bronze caravan. "Tea?" he says, chuckling. "You've brought the wrong drink, friend." His voice carries the lazy drawl of someone who has sampled far too much of his own inventory. You bow politely, motioning to the golden maidens. They step forward, trays balanced, kettles steaming. Dionysus leans up on an elbow, his grin spreading. "Very well. Surprise me." His followers satyrs lounging nearby snicker into their cups, but you ignore them. This is a serious mission, to convince the god of wine that tea has a place at his table. One bronze maiden pours the first cup. The steam rises, fragrant with chamomile, mint, and barley. Dionysus inhales theatrically, raising his brows. "Not bad," he concedes. He sips, then pauses. His expression wavers between intrigue and mischief. "But where's the sweetness?" he asks. You sigh, already guessing where this is going. Another automaton rolls forward with a honey jar, its lid embossed with little bees. Dionysus claps his hands in delight. Now that's more like it. He grabs the jar himself, tilts it, and lets a ribbon of honey swirl into the cup. The tea gleams golden. He takes another sip, nodding appreciatively. Yes, yes. Tea with honey, it's practically wine's sleepy cousin. You hide a smile. Historians still argue whether the Greeks sweetened their herbal brews with honey, but you've just watched it happen in divine high definition. It's both a fringe tidbit and a mainstream fact playing out in front of you, and honestly, it tastes pretty good. You sneak a sip yourself, the honey blending with chamomile into something smooth and drowsy. The satyrs gather curiously, peering at the steaming cups. One bold satyr snatches a tray from a golden maiden and gulps the tea. He blinks, surprised. "Warm, but pleasant," he mutters, as if confessing a guilty pleasure. Another satyr adds, "It feels responsible." The word hangs awkwardly in the air, clearly not a favorite in Dionysus's circle. You chuckle quietly. Don't worry, no one will revoke your reveler's license for enjoying a cup of tea. Dionysus stretches, setting his cup down with a lazy flourish. "Perhaps I'll keep this recipe," he muses. "Tea for the mornings, wine for the nights. Balance." You glance around at the grapevines, sticky amphorae, and groggy satyrs, and think balance might be optimistic, but you nod anyway. One golden maiden, perhaps misunderstanding the cue, begins to polish a grapevine with her cloth, trying to shine the grapes themselves. Dionysus bursts into laughter, clapping his hands. "Look at her. Even the machines want my vines gleaming." You groan softly but can't help grinning at the absurdity. Somewhere, a modern bartender is shaking their head in sympathy at this level of customer interaction. The tea service ends with Dionysus tossing a grape leaf lazily into the kettle as a parting flavor note. You're not sure if it improves the brew or makes it taste like salad, but you don't argue. Instead, you guide the automata to gather their trays, secure their lids, and prepare to roll on. Dionysus waves you off with one last chuckle. "Tell the others on Olympus," he calls, "that I approve, with honey." The bronze attendants clank softly in formation again, the tripods humming as they adjust their wheels for the path ahead. You glance back once more at the vineyard. Satyrs now sipping tea beside their wine, Dionysus lounging happily, the honey jars glistening in moonlight. Somehow, against all odds, you've turned the god of wine into a part-time tea enthusiast. As the caravan moves forward, you feel the night air cool again. Ahead, the path narrows between boundary stones, and a faint, mischievous breeze stirs your hair. You know who's waiting next, the trickster, with winged sandals and a love of shortcuts. If Dionysus made things sweet, Hermes will make things quick. The marble path winds into a narrower trail, where the pines lean close as if eavesdropping. The air grows brisker, the kind of crispness that wakes you just enough to notice the goosebumps on your arms. A faint rustle passes overhead, too quick for the wind alone. You look up and, sure enough, a flash of winged sandals darts through the moonlight. Hermes has arrived, grinning of course. He never appears without that grin. He hovers for a moment above the boundary stones that mark crossroads on Olympus, his caduceus staff gleaming faintly like a street lamp. "So," he calls down, "tea delivery? That's a first. Usually, I'm the one running errands." His voice carries amusement and a little mischief, like a friend who always knows where the shortcuts are. You bow, guiding the bronze caravan into a halt. The golden maidens raise their trays in careful formation, and the tripods squeak to a stop, kettles steaming softly. Hermes lands lightly on the marble, sandals touching down without a sound. He circles the caravan, peering at the servants, chuckling as one of them nearly collides with him. "They roll?" he asks, delighted. "Rolling waiters, I approve." You motion for a cup, and a bronze maiden pours with her now practiced grace. Hermes takes it, inhales, and then smirks. Chamomile? Mint? Barley? He slurps loudly. No etiquette lessons have ever reached this god. Still, he nods. Comforting, like gossip in liquid form. You stifle a laugh, muttering, "That's one way to describe tea." He gestures toward the crossroads. "I know every shortcut on this mountain. You want to reach Athena next. Don't take the long stairs by the olive groves. Too many echoing steps. You'll wake the owls, and they complain endlessly." He lowers his voice conspiratorially. "Instead, follow this hidden path. Less grand, but quieter. Perfect for sleepy deliveries." Historians still argue whether Hermes was primarily a messenger god or a trickster who delighted in confusing boundaries. Tonight, though, he's both your guide and your prankster, steering you toward a moonlit goat path that looks like it hasn't been swept in centuries. The bronze servants hesitate, their wheels testing the uneven stones. Hermes laughs and pats one on the head. "You'll manage. I've seen worse at the marketplace." You decide to trust him. After all, he is the god of wayfinding. You motion to the caravan, and together you edge onto the narrow trail. The moon filters through the pines, dappling the ground. Hermes walks backward ahead of you, sipping his tea with exaggerated relish. "You know," he says casually, "mortals once offered me honey cakes at crossroads. Sweet little bribes, so I'd guide their travelers safely." He shrugs, sipping again. "I preferred wine, but the cakes were fine too." A fringe tidbit floats into your mind. Some scholars argue that Hermes was originally a boundary stone, himself a herm, a simple pillar with a carved head, and somewhat awkwardly, a prominently carved feature at the waist. Over time, he became a messenger and trickster. You glance at him now, striding lightly with winged sandals, and think how strange it is that gods evolve like stories being retold at campfires. The bronze maidens continue carefully, trays balanced, while the tripods bump over roots. One stumbles on a stone and nearly spills, but Hermes catches it with impossible speed, setting the kettle back upright before a drop falls. "Fast reflexes," you murmur. He winks. "Perk of the job." The path widens again, opening to a small clearing lit by a lone oil lamp. Hermes sets his empty cup on a rock, pats you on the shoulder, and says, "You've got this. Just keep the pace quiet, the trays steady, and don't let Athena catch you yawning. She notices everything." His grin softens, almost fond. "Still, she might like you. You're doing work with care, not chaos. That counts." The wind stirs, tugging at his cloak. He lifts into the air once more, sandals beating the air with a faint flutter. Onward, sleepy courier. Follow the path straight to Athena's table. I'll see you again when you least expect it. And with that, he vanishes into the night, leaving only the whisper of wings. The caravan gathers itself. The golden maidens adjust their trays, the tripods hum reassuringly, and you exhale, relieved. With Hermes's shortcut, you step forward once more, the marble smoothing beneath your feet as the trail leads upward. Ahead, an olive grove stirs in the night breeze, and at its heart, a lamp glows steady and wise. Athena is waiting. The olive trees appear before you like old guardians, their silver-green leaves shimmering in the moonlight. The air here is cooler, touched with the scent of oil and bark, and you notice how the grove seems unnervingly quiet compared to Dionysus's vineyard or Hermes' breezy crossroads. Even the bronze servants lower their clanking as they roll, as though instinctively respectful. At the center of the grove glows a steady golden lamp, set on a simple wooden table. Athena sits there, her grey eyes calm and reflective, the flame mirrored in her bronze helmet resting at her side. She doesn't speak right away. Instead, she watches your caravan approach, her gaze as sharp as an owl's, catching every movement. You bow politely, signaling to the golden maidens. They step forward with careful grace, trays balanced. The tripods hum softly as they roll the kettle into position. Athena nods once, approval without words, and gestures for the cup to be poured. One maiden tilts the kettle, and steam rises, curling into the night air like threads of thought weaving into strategy. Athena lifts the cup, inhales, then takes a sip. Her face remains serene, though you notice the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth, something between satisfaction and curiosity. "Chamomile," she murmurs, "and barley, a blend for clarity, not indulgence. She sets the cup down gently. Wise, you smile faintly. Of course she'd phrase her approval like a judgment of tactics rather than flavor. You take a seat opposite her at the table, feeling oddly like a student called to present a project. Athena studies you, then the automata. Hephaestus's work, she says softly. Marvelous. He gives life to bronze, yet never boasts. You nod, remembering the smith's quiet patience. Historians still argue whether the myths of automatons reflected symbolic wisdom or early mechanical experiments, but Athena doesn't seem to care. To her, they are simply tools, perfected by craft and discipline. One bronze maiden, perhaps overthinking her performance, polishes the cup before serving the next pour. Athena arches an eyebrow but says nothing. You chuckle softly, whispering, "She's an overachiever." Athena tilts her head, perhaps amused, though her expression remains steady. "Attention to detail," she replies, "is a virtue, not a flaw." You resist the urge to salute. The lamp between you flickers slightly, and shadows dance across Athena's face. For a moment, she looks almost like the statues carved in her honor, unblinking and eternal. Then she takes another sip and relaxes, leaning back. "In councils," she says quietly, "the strongest drink too much wine and lose their temper. Perhaps they should drink this instead. Minds clear, tongues calm." The thought lingers, almost wistful. You imagine a rowdy Greek symposium settling into hushed philosophy over herbal tea rather than drunken argument. A lovely dream, though perhaps not very historically accurate. A fringe tidbit surfaces. You recall that olive oil was often used in rituals and daily life, from cooking to lighting lamps. Some scholars argue that Athena's association with the olive tree was more about practical value than symbolism. You glance around the grove, its branches heavy with fruit, and wonder if she'd roll her eyes at mortals debating whether she really invented the olive or just adopted it as her emblem. The bronze attendants finish their service, stepping back in perfect formation. Athena sets her cup down, her gaze lingering on them with approval. "Discipline," she says simply, then turns back to you, and you steady hands, patient guidance. You are learning from Hephaestus as well as teaching his servants. The compliment is subtle, but from Athena, it feels weighty, like a medal pinned to your chest. The grove grows quieter, as though the olive trees themselves are listening. An owl hoots from a branch above, its call low and steady. Athena glances upward, then back at you. "The path ahead leads to the sea terrace," she says, "where Poseidon waits. He will test your balance." Her eyes flick briefly to the trays and kettles. "Do not let the wind claim them." You nod, standing slowly. The golden maidens gather their trays, and the tripods adjust their wheels. The lamp flickers once more, then steadies. Athena inclines her head, a gesture of dismissal, yet also of blessing. You bow, grateful, and guide your caravan back to the marble path. As you leave the olive grove, the air shifts. You can hear it already, the low hiss of waves crashing far below, the salt tang carried up the mountain. The marble path begins to slope downward toward a wide terrace that seems to hover above the sea itself. And waiting there, trident in hand, is the god of the waters, ready to see how well you can keep your tea from spilling in the spray. The path descends in wide arcs, the sound of waves growing louder with each step. The air is salt-sweet, damp enough that you feel it cling to your skin. The bronze attendants shift nervously, their wheels squeak against marble dampened by sea spray, and the golden maidens glance down as if calculating how slippery their footing might be. Ahead, a vast terrace juts out over the water, carved into the cliff itself, with balustrades decorated in curling shell motifs. Standing there is Poseidon, trident in hand, his beard glistening with salt droplets, as though the sea has claimed him as its own cologne model. He turns as your caravan approaches, eyes glinting like deep water under moonlight. "Tea," he rumbles, voice rolling like thunder far offshore. "Not wine, not nectar, tea." He narrows his gaze, not hostile, but curious. "We shall see if it suits the sea." The waves crash below, spraying mist upward, and you instantly understand Athena's warning. The bronze kettles steam steadily, but a stray gust of salty air could snatch their warmth away. You motion for the golden maidens to steady themselves, gripping trays firmly, and for the tripods to lock their wheels against the marble floor. Poseidon watches, amused, as though testing whether your discipline will outlast his winds. One maiden steps forward, bowing, and tilts the kettle. The steam rises, curling against the salty breeze, and the god inhales deeply. Chamomile, he mutters, and barley, earthly flavors. He takes a sip, his massive hands dwarfing the cup, and then exhales through his nose. Warm, grounding, even here, above the waves, it steadies the body. His tone carries approval, though of course he wouldn't phrase it gently. A sudden gust whips across the terrace, nearly toppling one of the tripods. You lunge forward, steadying it with both hands. The bronze servant hums nervously, its wheels slipping, but you plant your feet, bracing against the marble. Poseidon watches, grinning faintly. Balance, he says, is always tested at sea. You mutter, half to yourself. Balance is also tested when carrying hot tea across slippery floors. Historians still argue whether Poseidon was worshipped more as a god of sailors or as a broader earth-shaker deity tied to earthquakes. Tonight, though, he seems firmly in maritime mood, his presence heavy with salt and tide. He leans against the balustrade, sipping from the cup, the waves below echoing his breaths. Mortals, he says, once poured wine into the sea, offerings to calm my storms. Perhaps they should have tried this instead. He swirls the tea, watching the steam, quieter, less quarrelsome than wine. Is he want the white to get the side? Another bronze maiden edges forward, offering him a second cup laced with honey. He accepts, tasting, then nods. Better. Sweetness softens the salt. He gestures toward the attendants. Hephaestus has done well, machines that bow and balance. Curious. He taps the trident against the marble, the sound resonating like a drum. The waves seem to respond, calming slightly. You take a moment to glance around the terrace. The railing curves into seashell spirals, and lanterns swing gently, their flames flickering in the wind. The view is breathtaking, silver moonlight streaking across endless water, waves shattering into spray against the rocks below. For a moment, you wonder whether this is why the Greeks imagined Olympus as so varied. Not just a mountain peak, but a collection of terraces, groves and balconies, each belonging to a god's personality. The tea service concludes as Poseidon drains his cup and sets it firmly on the balustrade. Tell my brother Zeus, he says with a sly smile, that the sea accepts his bedtime brew. For tonight. You bow, guiding the attendants to collect the cups. The tripods roll back into formation, kettles secured, their lids tight against the wind. Before you leave, Poseidon leans closer, lowering his booming voice into a rumble. Beware on the climb. The path turns inland, through harvest fields. Demeter waits with bread and barley. She will demand more than tea. He chuckles, the sound echoing like a wave rolling into a cave. Then he turns back to the sea, trident resting against his shoulder, eyes fixed on the horizon, as though listening to storms only he can hear. You guide the caravan back toward the marble path, relieved to be moving away from the spray, though the salt still lingers on your lips. The bronze attendants roll steadily now, their practice paying off even in the sea's chaos. Ahead, you catch the faint smell of baked bread drifting on the night air. The terrace of Demeter lies waiting, warm as a kitchen hearth in harvest season. The sea's roar fades behind you, replaced by a different rhythm, the steady crackle of ovens and the warm, nutty smell of grain. The marble path flattens into a terrace planted with golden barley stalks swaying gently in the night breeze. Lanterns hang from wooden beams, glowing like stars caught in jars, and the air is thick with the fragrance of freshly baked bread. You can feel it before you see her, the presence of Demeter, goddess of harvest and hearth, waiting in a place that feels less like Olympus and more like a countryside bakery that somehow drifted skyward. Your caravan clanks forward, the bronze kettles steaming, and soon you spot her. Demeter stands by a long stone counter, rolling out dough with forearms dusted in flour, her robe tucked up casually as though she's been baking for hours. She glances up, eyes soft but sharp, and gives you a nod. Tea, she says. And bread. The old pairing. Her voice carries the calm weight of someone who knows that nourishment, grain, or herb anchors everything. The golden maidens step forward, trays balanced carefully, while the tripods roll into place. Demeter wipes her hands on her robe and accepts the first cup. Steam rises, mingling with the smell of barley loaves baking nearby. She sips, then exhales. Chamomile, she murmurs, but under it, yes, barley. She smiles faintly, familiar. The same grain mortals grind for bread, now steeped for comfort. She gestures for you to join her at the counter. A fresh loaf rests there, its crust crackling, its inside steaming as she tears it open. She places a piece in your hand. It's warm, soft, and tastes faintly sweet, almost malty. No cup is complete without bread beside it, she says. The gods know this, though they forget. Mortals never forget. You nod, chewing slowly, the warmth spreading through you as surely as the tea. One bronze maiden leans forward with a tray of cups, but instead of offering, she pauses, fascinated by the loaf. Her bronze fingers hover as though she longs to touch it. Demeter chuckles softly. Even Hephaestus's children crave grain. She sets a small roll on the tray, humouring the automaton, who straightens proudly as though entrusted with treasure. Historians still argue whether offerings to Demeter were more about raw grain or baked bread, whether she preferred the unbroken promise of the harvest or the crafted comfort of food itself. Tonight, though, you see her smile as she dips her bread into the tea, and you think perhaps the goddess liked both. Harvest and hearth, field and table, they all circle back to nourishment. The ovens hum steadily, their heat warming the terrace. You notice jars of dried herbs and baskets of figs stacked along the counter. Demeter gestures to them. Mortals mix what they have, grain with mint, honey with barley. Necessity teaches invention. You remember the earlier debate about barley as beverage versus porridge, and you realize that here, in her hands, there's no real distinction. Grain becomes whatever the moment requires: bread, drink, offering, comfort. Another bronze maiden attempts to mimic Demeter's kneading motion, pressing a tray against her own bronze palms. The result is a faint clang, clang, clang that makes you laugh quietly. Demeter smiles indulgently, placing a real roll into the automaton's tray as though rewarding her effort. All apprentices must practice, she says, eyes twinkling. The air thickens with scent. Barley roasted, honey drizzled, herbs crumbled into the dough. You feel as though you're sitting not on Olympus but in some rustic village oven house, safe and warm. Even the tripods seem calmer, their wheels humming softly like lullabies. You sip your tea, pair it with another bite of bread, and for a moment you forget you're on a divine errand. You're just comfortable. And that, perhaps, is Demeter's true gift. Eventually, she sets down her cup and nods. The harvest thanks you, she says simply. She gestures toward the jars of herbs stacked neatly by the counter. Take these sprigs with you. They will keep the kettles fragrant for the road. You accept the bundle, the scent of dried barley and mint rising as you tuck it carefully into the tray of one golden maiden. The ovens glow softly as your caravan gathers again, trays raised, kettles steady. Demeter waves once, her hands still dusted in flour, and turns back to her dough, humming faintly under her breath. The terrace fades behind you, but its warmth lingers, clinging to your skin like fresh bread against your palm. Ahead, the path grows steeper, lit by faint flickers of lightning across the sky. The air grows heavier, charged with power. You know who waits at the summit: Zeus himself, the Thunderer, who will expect not just tea but respect, ceremony, and silence. You steel yourself, guiding the bronze attendants upward, ready for the most delicate delivery yet. The climb toward the summit feels different than the paths before charged, as if the very air hums with static. The marble under your feet carries a faint vibration, like a distant drumbeat echoing through the mountain. Above, flashes of pale lightning flicker behind cloud banks, though no thunder follows. The bronze attendants clank softly beside you, their trays steady, their wheels humming. Even they seem to sense the weight of what comes next. This isn't just another stop for tea. This is the throne room of Zeus. The path widens into a vast hall carved from storm-dark stone, open on one side to the night sky. Columns rise like tree trunks, their tops vanishing into low clouds. Torches line the walls, but their flames waver under the shifting charge of the air. At the center of the hall sits Zeus himself, shoulders broad as an oak, eyes sparking faintly with the glow of storms. His throne is carved with eagles, each wing stretching outward as if ready to take flight. You guide the golden maidens forward, their trays gleaming like captured lightning. The tripods roll cautiously, kettles steaming. Zeus watches silently, his gaze following every movement. You bow, heart thudding, and whisper to the attendants, "Steady, no clanking now." To their credit, they glide with practiced grace, the lessons of the forge and your endless rehearsals finally coming to fruition. One maiden steps forward, bows deeply, and presents the first cup. Steam curls upward, caught briefly in a flash of lightning before dissolving. Zeus takes the cup, his massive hand dwarfing it, and lifts it to his lips. He sips, pauses, then exhales slowly through his nose. The hall seems to still. "Warm," he says, simply, voice rolling low. "And steady." You suppress a smile. Coming from Zeus, that's practically a 5-star Yelp review. Historians still argue whether Zeus's role as king was more ceremonial or truly absolute, whether his thunderbolts were metaphors for law or simply the ancient world's attempt at explaining lightning. Tonight, though, none of that matters. Here, in this sleepy moment, he is just a weary leader tasting a cup of chamomile barley tea, letting it soften the edges of his storm. Another maiden steps forward with a second cup, this one sweetened with honey. Zeus sips again, then nods. Better. Sweetness tempers the storm. He leans back in his throne, steam curling around his beard, and for a fleeting moment, the god of thunder looks less like a storm cloud and more like a grandfather at the end of a long day. But you're not done yet. You motion for the tripods. They roll forward in a slow, dignified line, kettles gleaming, wheels whispering across marble. They halt before the throne, bowing slightly with mechanical grace. One tilts its spout, releasing a slow pour into a cup placed on the arm of Zeus's throne. The stream is steady, the sound soft, and you realize how absurdly proud you are your bronze students have passed their final test. Zeus raises the fresh cup in a quiet toast, eyes glinting. "To Hephaestus," he says, "who limps but creates wonders. To servants of bronze, who bow with dignity. And to you, courier of tea, who guide them with patience." He drinks deeply, and the hall exhales with him. The torch is steady, the clouds outside calm. For once, thunder does not follow lightning. One bold golden maiden attempts a curtsy after serving, her tray tilted just slightly too far. You hold your breath, but the kettle remains steady, the tea unspilled. Zeus chuckles, a sound like distant thunder softening into a purr. "Even clumsy grace is still grace," he says. You let out your breath in relief. The ceremony concludes with Zeus setting his cup aside and rising slightly from his throne. He raises one hand, palm open, and the storm above stills. "Olympus has been served," he declares, voice echoing through the hall. The tea is accepted. The attendants bow, the tripods hum, and you feel your shoulders drop in relief. The hardest part is over. You've carried bronze kettles through roses, vineyards, crossroads, groves, terraces, and bakeries, and now you've placed one in the hand of the king of gods himself without spilling a drop. Not bad for a bedtime delivery. Zeus settles back onto his throne, already drifting toward drowsiness, the steam of chamomile wrapping him like a cloud. He dismisses you with a nod. The lightning fades from his eyes. The hall grows quiet, like the calm after rain. You turn to the caravan, motioning softly. The bronze maidens lift their trays, the tripods roll back into formation, and together you leave the throne room, footsteps echoing gently across marble. Behind you, Zeus sips again, a god lulled by tea, and Olympus itself seems to breathe easier. Outside, the path spirals downward. The air grows lighter, the charge fading. Lanterns flicker warmly ahead, guiding you back toward the forge. The final phase of the journey awaits, shepherding your weary bronze companions home, tallying cups and tails, and returning the kettles to rest by Hephaestus's hearth. The marble path curves downward, spiraling away from Zeus's thunder hall. With every step, the air feels lighter, the heaviness of charged clouds replaced by the gentler rhythm of crickets chirping in unseen groves. The bronze attendants follow, trays steady, their movements more relaxed now, as though they too sense the hardest part of the mission is complete. The tripods roll with less hesitation, their wheels humming like sleepy bees. You glance back once more at the summit, faint lightning flickering far above. The gods of Olympus are sipping their tea, each one lulled in their own corner, Aphrodite among roses, Dionysus with honey and vines, Athena beneath olive lamps, Poseidon by the sea terrace, Demeter in her warm bakery, and Zeus on his thunder throne. The thought makes you smile. An entire pantheon calmed, not by sacrifices or speeches, but by a simple kettle of herbs. The path narrows as it winds into shadowed steps carved into the rock. The attendants shuffle carefully, trays tilted inward to protect the cups they still carry. You've become less of a courier now and more of a shepherd, guiding these mechanical companions home. One golden maiden trips slightly, her tray rattling. You steady her elbow with a gentle hand. "Almost there," you whisper. She adjusts her stance, head tilting gratefully, as though her bronze mind understands the reassurance. The descent opens into a quiet glade, lanterns swinging from branches overhead. You pause to count. Every kettle accounted for, every cup returned, no spills, no disasters. You feel like a teacher tallying a classroom after a long field trip. "Everyone made it," you murmur, patting one tripod's rim. It hums approvingly. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus's self-moving tripods were ever meant to be literal inventions or simply symbolic of divine craftsmanship. But as you watch them glide smoothly down the path, you can't help but think they embody something more universal, the satisfaction of a job done well, whether by hand, gear, or God. At one bend, you stop for a breath. The bronze attendants cluster quietly around you, kettles steaming faintly in the cool night air. You realize they've been your companions through every trial, clumsy, squeaky, proud, and patient. Machines, yes, but also partners. You chuckle softly. "Not bad, team. Not bad at all." One maiden raises her tray slightly higher, almost like a salute. You grin, imagining her filing away this moment into some bronze memory chest. Another adjusts her stance like a soldier at ease. The tripods line up neatly, their wheels clicking softly. For once, you don't feel like the leader of an errand. You feel like part of a sleepy brigade. The path curves again, revealing the first glow of the forge below. You hear the faint sigh of bellows, the warm pulse of fire still alive. Hephaestus is waiting. Soon, the kettles will rest, the trays will be stacked, and the bronze attendants will settle into silence until their next task. A mission completed, a night well spent. You breathe deeply, the scent of herbs still clinging to your hands, the salt of Poseidon's terrace still lingering on your lips, and the warmth of Demeter's bread still resting in your stomach. The memories of each stop glow like lanterns in your mind, small pockets of calm, and as you guide the caravan down the final stretch, you realize something. This wasn't just a tea delivery, it was a lesson in patience, rhythm, and care. A bedtime myth disguised as a sleepy errand. The forge doors loom closer, glowing softly in the dark. You straighten, motioning the caravan forward. Time to return to the hearth, to settle machines and mortals alike into rest. The forge doors ease open, sighing as though they, too, are tired. The glow of the hearth spills out, warm and steady, wrapping you in a familiar embrace. The bellows wheeze softly in the background, not with the urgency of labor, but with the long, slow rhythm of a workshop drifting into slumber. You guide the bronze caravan inside, and the attendants shuffle gratefully onto the stone floor, their trays clinking with a sound that feels more like punctuation than noise, the full stop at the end of a long sentence. Hephaestus stands by the anvil, waiting. His face is calm, his hands folded over a hammer that rests like a shepherd's staff. He studies the caravan, then looks at you. "All returned," he says simply. You nod. Every kettle, every tray, every servant made it back. Even Zeus sipped without scolding. In Olympian terms, that's perfection. The golden maidens step forward, bowing before their maker. They set down trays one by one, arranging them neatly, their bronze fingers moving with surprising tenderness. One maiden lingers, as if reluctant to let go of her kettle, then finally places it gently on the bench. Her eyes glow faintly, as though the warmth of the tea still lingers in her gears. You pat her shoulder. "Good work," you whisper. She tilts her head in acknowledgement. The tripods roll to the back wall, lining up in a perfect row. Their wheels click once, then lock into place. The hum of their mechanisms fades until only silence remains, like a chorus of crickets deciding to stop together. You glance at them, oddly proud machines designed for service. But tonight they became something closer to companions. Hephaestus steps forward, resting a hand on the polished kettle you helped forge earlier. His touch is gentle, reverent. "Balance," he murmurs, "discipline and warmth. You guided them well." Coming from a god known for few words, it feels like a medal of honor. You smile faintly, brushing soot from your sleeve. The forge air is thick with the mingled scents of herbs and metal. You inhale deeply, letting it settle into your chest. A quirky thought flickers through your mind. Perhaps the gods will wake tomorrow and wonder why they felt so rested, never realizing that chamomile and barley did what thunderbolts and nectar never could. You take a seat on a low stool, watching as Hephaestus oils the joints of one maiden, her bronze shoulders relaxing under his careful hand. The firelight flickers across the walls, catching half-finished projects, bird automatons, humming shields, even a kettle lid etched with spiral waves. It feels like a museum of possibilities, each invention dozing until summoned again. Historians still argue whether myths of automata hinted at early mechanical experiments, or were simply poetic flourishes. But sitting here, with the bronze attendants bowing softly into stillness, you don't care about the debate. You've seen them march, bow, pour, and polish. They may not breathe, but they lived this night. The forge grows quieter. The bellows sigh one last time. Sparks drift lazily up the chimney, fading into the night. You let your shoulders sink, the tension of the journey dissolving. The gods are settled. The machines are home. Your part is finished. You rest your hands on your knees, close your eyes, and let the warmth seep into you. Somewhere beyond the forge, roses rustle, vineyards drowse, olive trees murmur, waves hush against stone, and fields of barley breathe under the moon. Olympus itself seems to be falling asleep. Wind down, 300 words. The fire burns low now, its glow soft and steady, casting long shadows that stretch like blankets across the floor. The forge hums in silence, not with labor but with the memory of it, the kind of hush that follows a job done well. You lean back, letting your body sink into the stool, your breath slowing to match the quiet rhythm of the embers. The bronze attendants rest in their rows, eyes dim, trays stacked neatly, kettles cool. They look almost like statues again, waiting for another story, another night. But for now, they are still, and their stillness seeps into you. The weight of movement, the clatter of wheels, the soft clang of trays, all of it fades into the gentle hush of sleep. Outside, the mountain breathes in the night. The pine trees sway in slow conversation with the wind, their whispers threading into the stars. The gods themselves, lulled by tea, drift in their halls and terraces, their voices softened, their storms muted. Even thunder has fallen quiet, tucked beneath a blanket of chamomile steam. You feel it too, the ease of release, the comfort of letting go. Each inhale carries warmth. Each exhale melts away what's left of the day. You picture the bronze kettle resting, its spirals catching the last glow of the forge, and you mirror it, holding the warmth at your center. Nothing more to carry, nothing more to balance, just rest. The night folds around you like a soft cloak. Your eyelids grow heavier, your body calmer, your thoughts quieter. You are safe, steady, and at peace. Let the embers glow, let the mountain breathe, let yourself drift. Sleep now, dream gently,